हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम टू हेड आईएएस वंस अगेन। दुनिया एक बार फिर एक नए कन्फ्लिक्ट के एज पे आ खड़ी है। इस बार सेंटर में यूएसए और वेनेजुएला है। आज जब हम दुनिया में यूक्रेन और रसिया और वेस्ट एशिया पर फोकस कर रही है, सो लैटिन अमेरिका के एक कोने में एक साइलेंट बट सीरियन कन्फ्रंटेशन जो है वो डेवलप हो गया। दैट इज बिटवीन द यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स एंड वेनेजुएला। वेनेजुएला जो दुनिया को एक मेजर ऑयल रिजर्व के पर्सपेक्टिव से देखा जाता है, they are suffering from the economic crisis, political instability and international sanctions. इन सब के बीच बहुत गहरे तरीके से फंसा हुआ है। और दूसरी तरफ यूएसए जो डेमोक्रेसी, ह्यूमन राइट्स और रीजनल स्टेबिलिटी के नाम पे प्रेशर टैक्टिक्स और सैंक्शन यूज कर रहा है। रिसेंट डेवलप में क्या हुआ? यूएसए अटैक्ड ऑन द वेनेजुएला एंड कैप्चर्ड द प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ द Venezuela and take them into the custody. With respect to this, we are going to talk today. We are going to discuss what exactly it is and how it is related to our perspective. So we'll understand the whole dimensions of it, why exactly all such thing happened. Ideology क्या है, क्या different dimensions है जिसकी वजह से ये such situation has been arised and they have taken to this level that war even they started between these two countries. ठीक है, so बने रहिए इस वीडियो में, we'll start and we'll understand. First, we'll try to understand the US military intervention and capture the Maduro. The United States carried out a military operation in the Venezuela, resulting in the capture of the President Nicolas Maduro and his wife in Caracas. Caracas actually it's the capital of the Venezuela. ठीक है, वो राजधानी है. So they were flown to New York, face criminal charges including drug trafficking and narco terrorism. Donald Trump का ये कहना है कि because Venezuela is mostly involved in drug trafficking and narco terrorism, which is impacting the United States. But President Donald Trump also announced that US will run Venezuela temporarily to oversee a transition and stabilize the country, especially the oil sector. And there has been a US military actions and escalations. So United Nations and other institutions of the globe has their eyes on these such major issues. So if you see, the United States has conducted a military strike and the air operation in the Venezuela territory and the water, which Venezuelan also called act as a aggression. So these are the area of concern. What are the different perspective? Why all such situation arises? That we are going to understand. First, we'll understand the economic perspective. What is the actual importance of the Venezuela? That is the major area of the concern. See, Venezuela has the world largest proven oil reserve. वेनेजुएला के पास एक बहुत बड़ा चंक ऑयल रिजर्व का है. ऑयल मीन्स व्हाट? जो आज के टाइम पे ऑयल पे कब्जा है, इट हैज अ एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी प्लस जियोपॉलिटिकल डोमिनेंस. सो यूएस का मेन कंसर्न जो है, so Maduro, actually what happened when Maduro came to the power, he nationalized the oil assets and that reduced the role of the US oil companies, and Venezuela aligned oil export with the China, Russia and Iran, and these three countries are considered against the US policy. So that is one of the major, one of the important cause that you can understand, that is the economic perspective. Against this, what exactly US has done, that US sanctioned, cut regime revenue, forced political transition and reduce China Russia energy influence. So here is the conflict actually arises. But if you see the ideological perspective, that is capitalism versus socialism. So Venezuela follows the Bolivarian socialism, okay, which is anti-imperial, anti-US and state-controlled economy. But अगर आप वहीं यूएस को देखते हो तो यूएस promotes actually the liberal democracy, the free markets, and whereas Venezuela sees as authoritarian socialist regime, a bad precedent in the Latin America, the Cold War hangover. So that's similar to the US opposition to the Cuba. So these are one of the ideological perspective that you can analyze why these countries are fighting with each other. That is capitalism versus socialism. And third, that is major important part, that is a political perspective, that is democracy versus regime stability. US, what does US mention that? That Maduro manipulated the elections and suppressed the oppositions, violated human rights. And Venezuela narrative, what Venezuela actually tell that in perspective of the US opinion, that US is interfering in the sovereignty, in engineering regime change, using sanction as economic warfare, democracy promotion versus regime survival. These are the conflict actually going on. But if you understand the strategic and geopolitical perspective, Venezuela's strategic value, that is located in the backyard in the Latin America, which has access to the Caribbean Sea, Atlantic trade routes. So the location itself, the strategic location of the Venezuela, which is backyard to the US, and that has access to the Caribbean Sea, और जो पूरे Atlantic trade route को control करता है, that is the US का biggest fear. So growing Russia-China, Iran footprint near the US borders, military cooperations between the Venezuela and the adversaries, intelligence and the naval presence concern. All right. Security and crime perspective, you see. US where President Donald Trump put more stress on this crime perspective. That is, US accuses Venezuela elites of narco terrorism, drug trafficking. That is why it's cartels of the sun. So migration crisis also there. Millions fleeing Venezuela for the regional instability. So US links Venezuela to drug routes, organized crime networks. These are the. But what exactly the international law perspective tells us that? So US position has here that humanitarian interventions and responsibility to protect that it R2P and counter narcotics operations. Global criticism. If you see the global criticism from many countries that the violation of the sovereignty for interfering in the internal matter of a country, for say the US is interfering in Venezuela's internal matters. So that is violation of the sovereignty, even charter, and many more things. So here are various perspectives that you can understand: the economic perspective, the ideological perspective, the international law perspective, and the US and Venezuela what they have with respect to this. But every country has their own perspective in this regard, why all such things are happening. But you need to understand what exactly lies here. It is not just about that two countries are fighting and rest of the countries are enjoying. It is the time that they come together, they sit together, they discuss the problem, and they resolve the issues. For take into the consideration, if it is just happened with the Venezuela, what about the next happened with the another country? If you see the major instability found in the Middle East, the Iran is still in the crisis, the Yemen is still in the crisis, where Yemen you will find the Sana'a. There are so many places are there in the world map if you look at that. And Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, there are so many protests is going on. What about the world peace? And what about the international institutions? They are established to maintain the peace at the global level. So in this manner we need to think it off, and let's see what happens further. And analyzing all such issues based on the different dimensions gives you a new perspective to cooperate and to develop a new peace process. All right. And one more important thing, that Cuban, some of them are saying that Cuba is also part of it. And if you go back to the Cuban missile crisis that has happened way back, that was another perspective at that time, that indirectly the involvement of the USSR in the Latin America against the US is are the perspective of various recognized persons. So there are many ways to analyze such issues, but ultimately truth lies whether the resolution of the conflict has happened or not. So in this video I wanted to give you a perspective, not just preparing for the examination or something like that, but you need to think, you need to develop that mindset ki how you have to understand such issues, and you can develop a good idea, and you can give a good perspective to analyze different dimensions. So this is all about in this video I thought to make, and I have listened many of the videos that they have mentioned so many things, but the critical point here lies that whether you are reaching to the priest or not. So thank you so much being a part of the AIS, and we'll discuss further more what happens next. Thank you so much.